I just got back from my dream vacation in Hawaii, a trip I had been planning for months. I had expected to spend some relaxing time at the beach, but little did I know, the real drama was waiting for me at home. I walked through the door and, no joke, there's someone in my house. Not just anyone, though. It's Karen, the neighbor who's always acted a little *2* friendly. At first, I thought maybe she was just house-sitting for me, but as I started to look around, things didn't add up. The place was totally lived in, and not just a quick drop-by. She was settled in, as if she owned the place. As I'm standing there, trying to wrap my head around what's happening, Karen turns around, completely surprised. You would think she'd apologize or at least explain herself, but instead, she starts getting defensive. Before I even know it, she's dialing 911. Yes, you heard that right. She wanted me arrested for breaking into my own house. The whole situation escalated way faster than I could have imagined. And that's where the story gets even crazier. Stay tuned for the full drama of what happened next, because you won't believe how this one ends. Now, let me give you some background. I had been planning this trip to Hawaii for months. It was supposed to be a break from everything: work, stress, and just the day-to-day grind. When I left, everything seemed fine. I asked Karen to look after my house while I was gone, just to keep an eye on things. I didn't think anything of it. We've always exchanged pleasantries over the fence, and she seemed trustworthy enough. But this was beyond anything I could have expected. When I walked in and saw her, the first thing that hit me was how comfortable she seemed. She was lounging on my couch, a drink in her hand like it was any normal day. It wasn't just a quick visit or a one-time favor. It was as if she had made herself right at home. And the worst part, the place was a mess. Furniture was moved around, things were out of place, and I could swear I saw personal items of hers scattered around. That's when she started acting strangely. She got up quickly, almost too quickly, like she was trying to hide something. And before I could even ask what was going on, she whipped out her phone. I thought she was just calling to apologize or explain, but nope, she was calling the cops. On me. It was then that I realized something wasn't just off, it was serious. But why? Why would she want to make such a scene? What was she hiding? As Karen spoke to the 911 operator, her voice was shaky but firm, like she had rehearsed the situation 100 times. I could barely believe what I was hearing. She was telling them I had broken into my own house and was threatening her. It felt like a nightmare, but I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I tried to explain, calmly at first, that I was the owner of the house and I had just returned early from my trip. But she wasn't listening. She kept insisting that I was the intruder, that she had been living here while I was gone. I couldn't wrap my head around it. What does she mean by living here? She had access to the house. Yes, she was supposed to be checking on it. But this was something completely different. Was she planning to move in while I was away? The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like she had been preparing for this moment. It didn't feel like an innocent misunderstanding. It felt calculated. I noticed her things all over the place. Clothes in the laundry room, makeup in the bathroom, even food in the fridge. She had been making herself at home in ways I couldn't ignore. And then there were the strange items scattered around, things I didn't recognize. Old photos, random papers, and some jewelry that I swear I hadn't seen before. It made me wonder if there was more going on here than just a strange neighbor situation. The tension between us was thick. She kept talking to the operator, telling them how dangerous I was acting. Meanwhile, I couldn't help but think, what was her endgame? What did she want from me? I never imagined she'd go this far. I was trying to stay calm, but inside, I was panicking. I didn't know what was going to happen when the police showed up, but I had a sinking feeling that this was all going to spiral out of control. My mind was racing. How could she make such wild claims? What was she hoping to gain from all of this? As I stood there, just feet away from Karen, I realized something. She didn't just want my house. No, there was something deeper at play. She was trying to get me out of the picture completely. But why? And how far was she willing to go to make that happen? The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance, and I knew the clock was ticking. My heart raced as I tried to piece everything together. What if the police came and didn't believe me? What if they sided with her? What if I was the one who ended up in handcuffs? Karen, meanwhile, was practically gleaming with excitement. She kept glancing at the door as if she was counting the seconds until the cavalry arrived. And in her eyes, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Victory. It was clear she thought she had already won. But how could this be happening? What did she know that I didn't? The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. The police were here. The doorbell rang again, louder this time, and I could feel my entire body tense up. I shot Karen a quick glance, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. But it wasn't the kind of fear I'd expected. It wasn't the fear of getting caught. It was the fear of losing control. And in that moment, I realized just how deep her plan ran. She wasn't just playing the victim. She was playing a dangerous game. The knock on the door came right after, followed by the unmistakable voice of an officer. "Open up. We're here to help," he called, his tone professional but firm. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I knew this was the moment. Everything depended on how I handled this. I took a deep breath and stepped toward the door, my mind racing with a million thoughts. What was I going to say? Would they believe me, or would I be the one in trouble? I opened the door, and two uniformed officers stood there, their eyes quickly scanning the scene. They didn't waste any time. One of them looked me over and then turned to Karen, who was still sitting there on the couch, trying to look as innocent as possible. Karen immediately jumped in, claiming I was a dangerous intruder and that I had broken into my own house. Her voice quivered just enough to make it sound convincing. My blood ran cold. She was laying it on thick. I could see the officers exchanging a glance, trying to process the situation. "I'm the owner," I said, trying to remain calm. "I just got back from Hawaii. She was supposed to be looking after my house while I was gone, but now she's claiming I don't live here. I don't know what's going on, but she's been living in my house without my permission." The officer who had been listening to Karen now turned to me. His face was unreadable, but there was a hint of doubt in his eyes. "Can you prove that you own the property?" I could feel my throat tighten. Of course I could prove it, but in a moment like this, everything felt like it was slipping away. I reached for my phone, pulling up the documents I had saved, proof of ownership, photos of my trip, everything I could think of. But as I handed him the phone, I noticed Karen shifting in her seat, her fingers tightly gripping the armrest. Something about the way she was sitting made me uneasy. The officer looked at the screen for a moment, then turned to Karen. "What's your story?" he asked her, his voice even but firm. Karen's eyes flickered for just a second, long enough for me to catch it. It wasn't fear, it wasn't panic. It was calculation. She knew this was her moment. She knew the cops were here, and she was going to spin this in her favor. "I've been taking care of a house while they were gone. The place has been falling apart, and when I noticed things were starting to get worse, I made sure to stay here." But the longer she talked, the more I realized how rehearsed it all sounded. Her words came too easily, too perfectly. I couldn't help but wonder, had she been planning this for longer than I realized? Was this a scheme to get me out of my own home for good? The officer looked back at me, and I saw the uncertainty in his expression. This wasn't going the way I had hoped. Karen's story was compelling, and the fact that I had just walked in on her, out of nowhere, didn't help my case. As the silence hung in the air, I felt like the walls were closing in. The tension was unbearable. The other officer walked around the house, taking in the scene, glancing at the scattered belongings, the odd setup of my living room. It wasn't just a little messy. It looked like someone had lived here for weeks. The seconds dragged on. The officers were taking notes, but no one was speaking, and it felt like an eternity before either of them said anything. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that everything, my house, my vacation, everything, had been turned upside down. But by who? And why? What was Karen's endgame, and what was I going to do when this reached its breaking point? Then the officer looked at me, his face grim. "We'll need to take your statement," he said slowly. "But right now, it's her word against yours. You need to stay calm while we figure this out." The words hung in the air like a ticking time bomb. I could feel it, the weight of everything about to crash down. What was going to happen next? And would I be able to prove my innocence before it was too late? Just as the officer turned to ask me more questions, a loud thud came from upstairs. It was so sudden and jarring that I froze. Karen's expression shifted for a split second, her eyes widening before quickly narrowing. The officer paused, looking toward the stairs, then glanced at Karen. "What was that?" he asked, his tone now sharp. Karen immediately jumped to her feet, her voice a little too eager. "It's nothing, just the house settling." But there was something off in her voice, something that sounded like she was trying to cover something up. The officer didn't look convinced. He started moving toward the stairs, signaling for his partner to follow him. My mind was racing. I had no idea what was going on upstairs, but the sudden noise felt like a sign. Was Karen hiding something? Or was there something even worse happening that I hadn't noticed yet? I hesitated, then quickly followed the officers up the stairs, trying to ignore the knot tightening in my stomach. As we reached the top of the landing, I noticed a door at the end of the hall, slightly ajar. That was the door to the attic, a space I never used. It was always locked, and I had forgotten it even existed while I was away. The officers approached it slowly, but Karen was right behind them, almost pushing them out of the way. "Don't open it," she snapped. Her voice was no longer calm. It was sharp, desperate. "There's nothing in there, it's just old storage." But the more she said it, the more my suspicion grew. Why was she so adamant about keeping that door closed? What was she trying to hide? Ignoring her protests, the officer reached for the door and pushed it open. My stomach churned as the door creaked loudly. And then there it was. A faint smell hit me first, a musty, almost metallic scent. The officer peered into the dark attic, his flashlight beam revealing piles of boxes, old furniture, and something else, something I couldn't quite make out. The officer took a step inside, and that's when I saw it, a small wooden chest tucked away in the corner. It wasn't the kind of thing you just find in a random attic. It was too deliberate. The officer carefully approached it, and as he bent down to inspect it, Karen's face twisted into a look of pure panic. "Don't touch that," she shouted, her voice rising in alarm. She took a few steps forward, her hands reaching out as if she could physically stop him. But it was too late. The officer had already opened the chest. My heart stopped. Inside the chest were stacks of papers, documents, photographs, and several items that looked like they had been carefully placed there, hidden away for years. But it wasn't just any junk. The photographs were of me, of my family, of my house, pictures I had never seen before, taken at angles that suggested someone had been watching me for a long time.